Hey everybody, welcome. I am Samson Folk, the host of a lot of the Raptors Republic podcasting. Whether you're listening on the podcast channel or watching on YouTube, welcome. This is another episode of Outside Looking In, where we talk to people who cover teams, are fans of teams, know a lot about teams, get their opinion on the Raptors so we can try and achieve some sort of consensus. You can hear what people think about your favorite team. But in addition to that, you can learn about the league at large. 29 episodes. This is number 3, I believe, with Jackson Frank. If you want the bite-sized version of this podcast, he's already done a preview of the Raptors upcoming season over at Liberty Ballers. In addition to Liberty Ballers, he works at Dime Up Rocks and The Analyst, writing great stuff all the time. One of my favorite people to read. The analysis is always strong. The wordplay is even stronger. Jackson, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm excited to talk about a funky, fun team in the Toronto Raptors.
I am as kind words pilled to you as the Raptors are to pulling off of the strong corner. And so I know so people listen to this podcast a lot will remember you. Well, you've been on this podcast quite a few times, but especially we did a mid-series review, the 76ers and the Raptors. And I think that we agreed on a lot. I ended up saying, hey, maybe the Raptors do it in 7, and you stuck to, I think the 76ers make it in 6. But looking back on the Raptors season and then looking forward, I'm interested, broad strokes, what you think about this young, inventive team in Toronto.
Yeah, I think they're a team that felt like it constantly had to kind of reshape itself a little bit. Not in the necessarily they stuck to their principles a lot in terms of kind of what they wanted to do on offense and defense. But I don't think most people, I don't think most expected Fred VanVleet to be an All NBA caliber player through the first 30 games. I think as high as people were on Scottie into the year. I mean, I don't think they expected him to come out of the gates and necessarily win Rookie of the Year in a loaded draft class. It took some time for Pascal to work his way in. He missed the first 14 games, and I think it took him till at least maybe with 9th, 10th game to really kind of at least reach that all-star kind of form. Obviously, by the end, he was playing at a deserved All-NBA level, which he was recognized as. And then you had OG missing time. You had kind of you had the Precious Achiuwa ebbs and flows, and by the end of the season, he'd really become improved player than he was at the start. So it just felt like a team that it never quite was able to get itself settled until late January, and then we saw that great run where they beat a lot of playoff teams. Obviously, that came with some absences from key players on the Raptors and other teams, but they went 25-11, I think, over the final 36. 16 of those wins were over teams that made the playoffs. Like I said, there's some caveats for both sides, but just a really, really good stretch of basketball. They were 4th in defensive rating over that stretch. You kind of saw the vision for what they wanted to do. Obviously, they're not a great defensive rebounding team. They're not going to, if you get into the paint, you're probably going to have some level of success. But what they're going to be able to do is close those gaps on the perimeter. They've got a bunch of rangy, versatile stoppers on the perimeter, and they're going to create a lot of turnovers. They play such a chaotic style that they want you to kind of be baited into that chaos, right? Where you're scrambling and you're feeling like, okay, we have half a second to make a play here, and we're probably going to make the wrong decision, or the Raptors are making the wrong decision. So you saw kind of the vision by the end, but obviously by the end, the offense wasn't where it wanted to be because Fred VanVleet was dealing with some injuries, and that was people kind of, you could say maybe that was related to him having such a ridiculous workload on both ends to open the year, and so that was kind of the downside, right? As they were VanVleet kept them afloat for so long, and then once they were comfortably navigating the waters, VanVleet was struggling in his life vest out of the raft. So the goal for them this year, obviously, you would hope that is VanVleet can kind of go back to more of that complimentary role a little bit offensively, do a little more off-ball stuff, and be that defensive pest that we've seen for half a decade now at this point. Just a team that kind of was searching for its identity for a while and never quite got to see the full form of it because of the rotating cast of just caliber of players, I would say.
So of the people I've had on so far, you're definitely the person who I think pays the most attention to the draft. And I know that you're very familiar with Scottie's film. I know that you've seen a lot of him, and you also like covered him during a playoff series. So just before we get into the comparisons and contrasting the Sixers and the Raptors, I just want to take a moment to ask you about Scottie Barnes, Rookie of the Year. What are you looking for heading into year 2, and what progressions do you expect him to make?
Yeah, so he's a guy that like I didn't end up doing a ton of draft work during the 2021 cycle. Like I watched a lot of Evan Mobley. I watched Jalen Suggs because I'm a Gonzaga alum. I did a breakdown Jalen Green because he was fascinating. I saw more of Scottie in like AAU stuff because that's when I was still doing a lot of draft coverage. So I truthfully didn't have a great grasp on him, and I think I probably sent out some tweets that were me group thinking things that were a little lower on him. So I'll own up to that. But what impressed me most about Scottie is like he played through contact so well as a rookie, and that was kind of his whole thing, right? As a scorer, getting to the intermediate range, and kind of getting guys leaning and whatnot, and using that touch. I think in year 2, and one of the things that was like before even like when Scottie was more of like people considered me more of a top 10 prospect than the guy who's now a top 3, 4, top 2, whatever you want to call him in this class prospect. It was the passing was really, really good. What I think he kind of struggled to rein in a little bit was like he had so much creativity, or freedom, excuse me, is the proper word. Like in AAU, even at Montverde at times, and at Florida State, he played a lot of point guard. That I think he struggled to kind of maximize some of his passes to the same degree. Some of the accuracy, the consistency wasn't there, but he's a really talented passer. So I think the goal would be for him to kind of go from a talented, albeit inconsistent, to one who's consistently making a lot of high value passes, putting guys in the right spots. And he's in a good situation because, I don't think he and Pascal are by any means a 1-to-1 comparison, but you're looking at two bigger ball handlers who like to play through contact, seek out contact, initiate contact with their shoulders and bumps and hips and things like that. And obviously we saw what Pascal's done as a passer this past year and even, previously. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing that people loved a lot about Scottie, which you saw parts of at times, was the defensive upside, right? The guy who's incredibly mobile for was he 6'10", 6'11", 6'9"?
Yeah, who knows how tall he is? He looks big. He's in
the Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum conundrum now, where we don't know exactly how tall he is. He's big, and it's impressive he can move that well at that size. But you saw it, like just the way he was able to, even that Philly series, you saw the way he was able to pressure James Harden at times in the full court. Other guys as well. Obviously, that led him to be susceptible to some breakdowns. Just being blown by it. I mean, that's just that's kind of the nature of things. But you saw that would be very impressed with just the kind of the scope of on-ball stuff, things you could do. But I think what made Scottie really interesting was kind of the off-ball defense at times as a prospect, and I would have to go back and watch it more in depth, but it's just kind of pulling from my memory of a couple of years at this point. But that felt also inconsistent last year. I think there were months and stretches where you saw him figure it out, and I definitely think he was better by May or April, whenever the season ended, for him than he was in October. But like going back through some notes, there was a lot of like he misread this play, maybe he botched an X out. He was supposed to help off the strong side here because that's one of the things the Raptors do a lot, especially against poor shooters in the corners. Cough, cough, with Steve Steibel. But like he would just mess up an X out. He would fail to rotate as a low man at times. But then you saw like some ridiculous ground coverage. So maybe like there was an errant bounce pass in the middle of a lane to a roller, and Scottie was in the corner, and all of a sudden he was in the paint and he got a steal, things like that. So that's natural. Like it's just like. It's cliche, but you can never overstate like how hard it is for rookies to assimilate to the speed and the complexities of NBA offenses and how to navigate it defensively. So I don't like hold it as a mark against Scottie. It's like I use it as a plus when guys like Evan Mobley come in, or even Cade Cunningham, who I thought was really good defensively, but he had his own struggles too. So I think Scottie overall was fine defensively, but I think you want him to be squarely, by this time next year, you want to be talking about Scottie squarely as a positive passer and off-ball defender, I think. And then I think you're looking at a guy who's, right in that at least all-star buzz. I don't know exactly. I mean, it's just there's so many guys in the given year that can be all-star caliber. It just depends on injuries and shooting variance and things like that. So at least an all-star buzz. I think that's kind of the path for him. But also like just building upon his second half scoring rep numbers, right? I think he averaged about 3 or 4 more points a game post All-Star break. The efficiency was 3 or 4 points better in terms of true shooting, I believe. Now I do think the collective league true shooting kind of like steadily rose the entire year as the
free throws went up too.
As the NBA rules became more lax after those first couple of weeks when Trae Young and James Harden couldn't buy a call and they were letting hand checks happen like we were back in the 90s again and all that. Maybe I got those wrong. I can't remember if the hand checks were allowed or not allowed back when MJ was in his prime. So I apologize if there's a historian listening to this and I botched it. But the point being is like he got better as a scorer, and I'm curious to see like could he be a let's say like last year the second half was like it was 17 or whatever on plus 2.5 true shooting. Can he be 19 on plus 3.5 this year for an entire year? And that would be a notable bump from rookie year. So those are kind of the 3 things I'm looking for from him this year. And I think what's remarkable at Scottie is his rate of improvement just throughout last year, and just how much better he got between Florida State and Toronto. It reminds me of Tyrese Halliburton in that sense, who both are. I don't think it's coincidence that those two are 2 players that everyone seems to gravitate toward and really enjoy spending time with and watching. So I'm not ruling anything out for Scottie, but those are the kind of the areas that I'm highlighting for him, and I expect him to be better in those realms, and not like oh you need to be better, but I just his nature, I expect him to be better, and so I think he will be.
You brought up the off-ball defense. You brought up the passing. 2 things. The passing was good all year for sure, and especially since he got to play around in transition, the passing that lagged behind was half-court stuff where Scottie, just because of Fred, Gary, Pascal, OG, had a lot of one-on-one matchups. And people wouldn't send the extra help. They'd just be like, baseball savant, dog in them, 100th percentile, like, go get it. And on top of that, he struggled with doubles and stuff like that. So I'm interested to see how he starts making half-court decisions as a passer, as a manipulator and stuff like that. And the off-ball defense, you cited at the start of the podcast, that run they had of 4th, they were ranked 4th in defensive rating. During that run, I observed, now if you go to like EPM, it'll correlate with that, but I observed that Scottie was a positive as an off-ball decision maker, ground coverage, all that kind of stuff. I love your answer on Scottie. We're on a lot of the same points. Now we'll see if we have the same points for the 76ers. I'm going to lay out.
I would just follow up the half court passing is a very good distinction there. I think that's kind of where I should have articulated. But yeah, obviously you would know more about the off-ball defense. He's a guy that I've been doing a lot of deep dives on these rookies, from Evan Mobley to Quentin Grimes and whatnot. And Scott is a guy that's on my list to circle back on again. Obviously, I reviewed my notes a little bit before watching this, but he's a guy that I want to get an even better feel for because I think he just had such a ridiculously fascinating rookie year. But yeah, I think the half court thing is an important distinction for sure.
Well, you want to get in before he wins MVP, right? No.
I want to get some get some future bets in there.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I was gonna say is that I'm gonna try and get on the same page, or see if we're on the same page. I'm gonna do the concise sell for the 76ers as the team that wins the championship this year, and you tell me if any of the ingredients are missing or if you think they aren't ingredients. And so, I think the 76ers are that's the team I would put the most money on if I were a betting man to win the championship. And I think fundamentally it is Joel Embiid is a world-ending defender. We didn't see it because of injury, because of breaking down against the Raptors, especially the back end of that series. But Joel Embiid closes off way more of the court than most players are able to. The James Harden renaissance is real. It's not completely back to where he was, but it's definitely going to be better than what we saw towards in the playoffs, I would say. Tyrese Maxey is still the Tasmanian devil that completely rips every gap to shreds, finishes everything at the rim, hits every pull-up 3, hits every catch-and-shoot 3, is just like this insane player that they got outside of the lottery. Unbelievable. And the collection of like wingy defenders, Tobias Harris still being not a max player probably, but pretty damn good. I just see a team that will just win a lot of games because James Harden and Joel Embiid are going to break every defense because, of course, they will. And then they're going to defend well enough. Am I missing anything?
No, I don't. I think. I mean, like I have the Sixers as one of the three best teams in the East entering the year. I think the point about the delineation of Houston Harden versus pre-injury Harden is important. Like I think, like you saw how good he was, in 2021 as kind of that point guard, letting Kyrie and KD do their thing as incredible play finishers. Obviously, they create for themselves to a degree, but a lot of it was all right. We're going to run a bunch of pin downs and flex screens and stuff, and just like let these all-world shooters receive passes from an all-world passer. I think that's all they really. And the way I've tried to articulate it is like Harden could take a step back as a scorer in that role because he had two, alpha scorers, right, or bona fide, 1A scorers, and so that's why his numbers what they were as a scorer. Last year with the Sixers, they needed him to be a little more than that, right? Like he couldn't do it post injury. Like he had the occasional explosion, a few games in the regular season with the Sixers, the game 4 against Miami in the second round. I think game 6 against Toronto when he was really, really good. If I recall, he came out really aggressive and kind of set the tone for that game. So like you saw it at times, but he just couldn't channel it on a consistent basis. And the Sixers didn't have that qualified like second scorer, in the second round and beyond against a really good team like Miami that, was a great defense and, was, as close as could be to making the finals last year. So, yeah, I think it's just about him being able to get back there. But I mean, he and Embiid are a great floor raising duo. They're all like, I'm not saying they're not a ceiling raising duo, but like you get them for 70 games a year. I think you're going to win a lot of games. I think one of their biggest issues last year was a lack of wing depth defensively and kind of versatility switching across positions. We know PJ Tucker can kind of guard 1 through 4.5. You don't want him guarding, the 5s and the 1s a ton, but like you saw what he could do to Trae Young. You saw what he could do to Harden at times. Like this is clearly a really versatile.
The in a pinch caveat, heavy lifting. Anytime you do the 1 through 5, you just toss it in a pinch, in a pinch guard.
Yeah. Well, I think, right. Well, I think just the way I would expand on that is you feel okay with, like, you're not scrambling to get out of PJ Tucker out of guarding a 1, right, or a 5 at the time, right? Whereas, you throw Tyrese Maxey on a 5, or you throw like a Drummond on a 1. I'm not saying I'm not just like, then you're like, hey, let's are we blitzing? Are we trying to like do kind of like an interesting on-ball switch without giving up an advantage? So with Tucker, you feel fine in those situations, assuming he's going to guide them into another switch that is a little more comfortable. Daniel House, I thought, was really, really solid last year with Utah. What I've tried to bake into my analysis as of late is veterans on bad teams just tend to have more pop when they play for good teams. We saw it with Blake Griffin a couple years ago. We might see it with John Wall this next year. Fingers crossed to do for Wall, but I think we saw it with Daniel House last year, and they're only going to ask him to play, I don't know, 18 minutes maybe. Like I think, kind of what Danny Green was doing last year. Green had a lot of injury troubles. Obviously, they needed Danny more in the playoffs before he went down. But like they were playing 18, 25 minutes a lot during the regular season just to preserve him. And now you've got pretty solid wing depth with, guys who can guard the 3 and play the 3 a little bit. So, and I think that'll help. I really like what we saw from Tobias over the last 2 months of the year. I always talk about it, but that game that they got destroyed on national television against the Nets, that was the silver line that Tobias shot well from 3, and that was the beginning of him figuring out his new role, with Harden in the fold. So we saw how good he was, at times in that Toronto series and even that Miami series as an on-ball stopper. And I think what helps now is last year the issue was like once Toronto Miami were like, oh, he just can't really navigate screens that well because he's a strong 6'8" guy. Most players that size can't. We'll just set those screens. Now it's like, the Sixers can bring a Daniel House, a PJ Tucker. They can bring Embiid into it at times as well. A Paul Reed, it seems like he might be the backup center, is obviously a pretty, impressive switchable guy. Matisse Thybulle is probably going to have a role. D'Anthony Melton, I haven't mentioned. Like there's a lot more. You can feel a lot more comfortable if Tobias is taken off a matchup that it's not super exploitive. Whereas last year it was like Jimmy Butler and Pascal Siakam were just going to completely destroy kind of whoever they were getting off of that screen once Tobias was on someone else. So I think that helps a lot. But yeah, I totally agree with where you're at. I think Maxey, I really liked the way Maxey developed defensively last year. Still has things to work on, and there's just the nature of him being 6'2". He's going to be picked on switches at times, but I'm really excited for him. Like even if the jumper the 3-point shot regresses a little bit, I think you're going to see him even more comfortable with that mid-range pull-up, which is kind of an area that I know Sam Cassell has identified as something he's working on, that they've worked together this summer. Noah Levick wrote a cool article at NBC Sport Philadelphia a couple months ago about kind of the work that Cassell is doing with Maxey. So people are more interested in that. I'm sure you can find it just by searching all those buzzwords: Maxey, Cassell, Noah Levick. It'll come up. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Obviously, like people are always gonna be like, oh, I don't know about Doc. Like, and I think that's reasonable. But like, I thought Doc was like completely fine last year in the playoffs. Like, obviously, him starting DeAndre Jordan was a bad decision. Like, DeAndre Jordan's past his prime. The way he kind of handled some of the things with reporters wanting them, like asking about Paul Reed, obviously that was something that was probably frustrating for them. And I didn't love the way Doc handled that, kind of his indignation toward it. But I thought he was fine. Like I think we talked last year when we did our midseason check-in, like he was coaching a pretty good series against Toronto. I thought he did some solid things against Miami. Now, if you want to say the way that Philadelphia ended that series kind of with 2 lifeless losses, yeah, you can. That I'm sure, like to an extent, you can say that maybe Doc should have had them more prepared. But I thought last year, especially, like he was fine, especially compared to the year before, where it was like, why are you playing Dwight Howard? Why is Maxey not getting many minutes in the second round? Why is Shake Milton playing key fourth quarter minutes against Atlanta? Those are the things you point at. But last year, I thought he was fine. So, like, I think this team is talented enough, like, and cohesive enough to be a really good team. And maybe Doc holds them back from being anything more than an Eastern Conference Finals team. But like, I mean, if you're one of the 4 final teams in a given year, you're really, really, really good. And given the Sixers will be going on 22 years without an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, like of course, Embiid is good enough to lead a title team, but like, I don't think, as long as they don't lose like 4-0 in embarrassing fashion to some team, I think you would take that. And I feel like Doc is like, I don't think Doc is some top 10 head coach, but I think this roster is good enough, and we saw enough from him last year, even with some of his faults, that like he can do enough for them to like make it as far as they are capable of on the floor with the talent they have.
You and I, 2 people who covered the series, 2 people I know that did not lean into the toxicity that came along with that series, because there was a really great players got injured in that series. That is going to make fan bases feel a certain type of way, both sides. There's room for a rivalry here. And while the 76ers, I think consensus would be considered, as you said, like in that top 3 tier, and the Raptors would need developments to make people think about them jumping into the contender tier on a national opinion scale or international opinion scale. They're probably currently in a tier lower as far as consensus. There's opportunity for a rivalry here. Do you expect it to be fun, uninteresting, or just like, oh my God, this is intense and I'm uncomfortable about it as far as this season goes?
I think these teams kind of have such like contrasting styles in a lot of ways that, like, at least on the court, I find their games really fun. At least as it pertains to like fan bases, I try to like kind of just stay away from all of that stuff for the most part. As someone who covers a team, it's not really my job to, regulate fan behavior, or even, like maybe I'll pass judgment privately, but I don't ever really want to comment on that sort of thing. I think we're beyond the point of like peacemaking among the fan bases. Just we're going on year 4, of the Kawhi thing. The Kawhi shot, of course, and was a great series, and a team that, and I think what stung even more for Sixers fans or Sixers people was that team was really good, and it immediately got stripped down, and it played neck and neck for 47 or for 335 and 59 seconds with the eventual NBA champs. That was some quick math, geez. And so that kind of stung for them. But I'm really excited. I think the whole like Pascal Joel thing, like they're like everything that we see, they're super close, and it's unfortunate that injury happened, and you can make what you want of it, but clearly I don't think like Pascal and Joel are like, doesn't seem like they're harboring any resentment for each other. At least, obviously Joel will be the one that you would probably, be the one more frustrated, but it seems like, I think they I don't know, they talk.
They squash. Well, they're close.
Yeah. They're always,
yeah.
I think we saw
they're
something
countrymen.
Like post injury that like, it seemed like they're totally fine, which is not surprising. I mean, I think a lot of people talk, like people want to make more what happens on a field, a court, a diamond, than it is. It's just like, I mean, it's just the way people are competitive. That you say things, you do things, you look a certain way, and then you really you get off the field or whatever it is, and you're generally going to be if you're close before that, you're going to be close after that, as long as it's not the most egregious occurrence ever. So I'm excited. I think this would be a fun rivalry. It feels like the Sixers are one really good Knicks run away from having a rivalry with every team in its conference or any division. I mean, the Celtics, Sixers is obviously a longstanding thing. The Nets and Sixers is a thing now, of course, after that trade. The Raptors Sixers is bubbling. It's definitely kind of a rivalry, but it's got the potential to really take off if they're kind of vying for similar positioning like they were kind of last year.
What were you saying?
I think we're just talking about the rivalry of kind of the rivalry with all three, three of them at least, and the Raptors could certainly become even more. It could heighten a lot of this next year if things go away. Especially I think all we're away from is we need Scottie and Maxey to be vying for that last All-Star spot in the next couple of years, and then we'll really be getting into
with the doomed teammates during the skills challenge background too, the hug and everything. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So
I forgot about the travesty that was their skills competition appearance.
It's the two Maxey couldn't hit a jump shot despite being the greatest jump shooter alive last year, and Scottie, despite completely subsisting on just insane bullshit flip shots, couldn't make one at the rim.
That was their regression to the mean. It didn't count.
Yeah. They're pretty good. That's a good place to. Well, it's a good and bad place to have it. Okay, the 76ers and the Raptors. You touched on it briefly when you said these teams are so different that their matchups are awesome, because the Raptors start behind the 8 ball of just being so undersized with Embiid that all the machinations of trying to catch up look awesome defensively, especially when it works. Then you're like, wow, something's happening here. And then for Philadelphia fans, you're like, just make the read, probably. And so I'm curious if you see any similarities between these teams.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. Maybe this is a broad one. Maybe I'm getting more limber than I'm capable of. I'm going to pull a hamstring here, but I think the for me the kind of the thing that takes both of these teams to kind of a level that they aspire to is kind of that wing depth in different ways, right? The Raptors have all this wing depth, and they can guard a bunch of different positions, cover ground, and make stuff happen on both ends. And a lot of their wing depth is kind of spearheading things, right? Whether it's if you want to call Scottie wing, Pascal a wing, OG, Precious can move and play like a wing on both ends, versus where the Sixers, kind of the way that they vaulted themselves, at least as we see it, into that top tier was by adding a bunch of guys who can do wing things, right? Daniel House can do, he's a spot up 3 guy, can attack some closeouts, make some passes, really, guard 2 through 4. PJ Tucker, we know, he's a wing. D'Anthony Melton is only 6'2", but has a ridiculous wingspan. He can guard a lot of wings and is a spot up shooter. Can shoot off movement. Is kind of an off ball wing might. So that's like I said, maybe getting a little too limber with things, but that's kind of what I see. Right, is that if the Raptors are going to go really far this year, it's going to be because maybe Scottie takes the leap, Pascal plays like an All-NBA guy again. We see OG taking another leap in his skill development offensively. If the Sixers are going to go as far as they need to, obviously their best player is going to lead them, but last year we saw kind of a lack of versatility defensively and kind of maybe release valves offensively at times, and shrewd decision makers around Embiid and Harden hold them back. And this year, if those guys play up to their level as complementary players, it could kind of help take them over the top. Now, Harden has to play better. Embiid has to play better. Than obviously, Embiid has the caveat of a couple injuries, but that's kind of where I see some similarities, even if it's a very weird parallel.
So before I ask you the last question between these two teams, I just want to ask you about Pascal and how you're gauging him, because you do national work. You write about a lot of teams, and you were somebody who, I think, when a lot of people were kind of pushing off, okay, Pascal he's plateaued, he's regressed, that you were, in addition to people like myself, saying, I see something here, there's still room for growth. This is a player who's being underrated. All NBA season soon come. There it was. Do you expect progression from this point? Him to be static, regression? Like, what is your vision of Pascal's year next season?
Yeah, I think. Well, and what was so weird about that narrative to me is it was used as like an indictment on him, despite him being an All NBA player and someone who was a 2A, 2B on a title team. Like
Yeah, but no bag.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It was just they were acting like he was like a top 80 player and got it was like, I mean, he contributed to winning at literally the highest level in the star role. I don't know how much more I expect of him to get better. Like I wouldn't be surprised, but like, he is 28 from 29 next year. 27 to 29 is kind of that range where you peak. We're kind of seeing with Embiid right now. Maybe Embiid gets even better and he proves you wrong, but like, I mean, he's already, has a claim to the top player in the world if you want to make it. And so I don't know like if I would bank on him getting better, but like I'm not using that as a slight. I mean, I have him in kind of that top 15-ish range. I think he was a well-deserved All-NBA player last year. You saw him progress as a playmaker last year. And I think you're seeing him get more and more comfortable as an off the dribble shooter. I think that would be kind of, I think you would see those would be kind of the two, just, I wouldn't say leaps because leaps kind of quantify something large generally or describe. I would say like improvements. Those would be the two where just minor areas that could maybe like, I'm not saying it would happen. I'm not saying I would make this case, but the kind of the argument or the path we're in would kind of creep into that top 10-ish status, right? Would be, can he become even better as a playmaker on the move? How much more comfortable and effective does he get, off the dribble? Because that was kind of the big area, right? That, after the 2019 series, Embiid sagged off of him and he had no idea how to score from, as a dribbler, after dribbling, and that was kind of what helped him become an all-star and all-NBA player the following season. And we saw him really kind of expand on that this past year when he became, he was an all-NBA player for the second time. So those would be kind of the two areas for me. Maybe a little more defensive, just, I don't know about consistency, but just turning up a dial a little bit, just kind of tapping into kind of maybe more of the all defensive caliber stuff we saw before his offensive role expanded, which is a really tough thing to ask for. But that would be kind of the three areas: just the passing, the off dribble shooting, and maybe a little more, the elite defense versus the really, really good defense. Maybe I'm underselling defense, but that's kind of how I view it.
I think it's fair to say like turn the dial up because Pascal definitely had stretches and games where you're like, holy hell, this is the dude. But you could also see this is a guy who carried out. Well, he was like a helio creator for a decent portion of the season. Fred was injured. Gary couldn't make shots. They were getting zone every game. Like OG had a broken finger. It was impossible, and he had so much of the possession. So there were some games where you could tell Pascal, somebody was driving near him, and that dig down was kind of like a step. But anyway, the small thing that Pascal can do that I think will help a lot is something that he hasn't been able to do for a decent stretch of time, but it's above the break threes. And not even off the dribble, just if the ball swings to him, it can't stick. Like hit that jumper because he didn't really hit. He was great from the corners last season, but he wasn't really hitting the above the break stuff at a high enough volume or percentage. And if that happens, that immediately that changes the dimension of how teams have to guard him there, and also changes like the efficiency on when it's like side top side and it like pops out to him above the break. That's basically the only thing. Okay, that's the Pascal conversation. Last one. You read my article from this morning and talking about like the Raptors defense, innovation, all that kind of stuff. And like, how does a team improve? Where does it go? And not from a player improvement perspective, but because I know you know quite a bit about schematics in the NBA, play styles, all this kind of stuff. When you watch the Raptors, is there any low-hanging fruit? Is there any schematic changes that you would wish for? When you see that team, is there anything that pops to you as like, they could do this and they're not?
Oh, man.
That's a tough question.
It's tough too because I think the Raptors are so interesting because depending on who you ask and how they view the definition of versatile, you could say they are versatile, and you could also say they aren't. Just because the lack of they can't go big on the inside, right? They're huge on the perimeter with they can throw out the Scottie, Pascal, OG, Gary quartet out there, and then Fred, who plays like he's 6'4", despite being 5'11", 6 foot, like that huge. But like the Precious is not big. Kem Birch is not like a menacing guy, and he has his own issues on offense that kind of hurt you. And Christian Koloko was a rookie, and I don't like you don't want to really bank on a rookie, a second round rookie at that, changing like how you can play. So it's tough for me to say. Like nothing really comes. Like I feel like I'd have to go watch like 8 Raptors games from different opponents and different offenses and really get a better feel for it. But like,
can I suggest something and
yeah,
I'll
absolutely.
bounce it off you? So a really insane stat is that Pascal, as far as like points per possession allowed in drop, 97th percentile. Now, this isn't high volume, but Precious I thought was good in drop. In fact, I thought Precious was great in drop. And one thing I'd like to see the Raptors do is more of a change of pace, not when Kem Birch is on the floor, but with Pascal and Precious in particular. And Scottie, Scottie had games last year where he had like, just especially against the Knicks, it was in early December, like, what the hell, this guy's a drop menace. And I'd like to see them go to it a little bit more often, just to throw a wrench at other teams.
Yeah, I think broadly my suggestion would have been just to like be a little less frenetic, like
Tone
that,
it down.
that would be, just because like obviously they were great down the stretch of the regular season defensively, like I mentioned, 4th over the last 36 games in defensive rating. But there were definitely stretches, even when a lot of their guys were healthy and playing well, where you saw like how that can cause breakdowns and stuff. And I definitely agree that like I think it's because you have good screen navigators. Like Fred is really good at that. OG, when he's at his best, is pretty damn good at that, especially for his size and length out there. Obviously Pascal, if he's on driving, you talking about as the big man, but like I even think Pascal, especially for his size, is like pretty solid around screen. I think that's always the important caveat. Like I think I talked about on another podcast recently, but I remember a couple years ago someone asked Giannis about navigating screens because like you kind of struggle with that, and in the most in the most polite way he could, he was kind of like, "Bro, I'm 7 feet tall. I think I do pretty well for 7-footer." And I think it was Eric Nem who does a lot of great work covering the Bucks for The Athletic, and they have a great relationship as far as I know, reporter to athlete. But he just explained it really well, and so now I was trying to think about that, right? That yeah, these guys, maybe I should be kinder to Giannis navigating the screen because he's 7 feet tall versus, praising I don't even like a Fred obviously, who, is great at that. Or even a Herb Jones, Mikal Bridges.
There's a lot more avenues around the screen.
Yeah, I mean, smaller. It's hard to be flexible that I wouldn't know. I'm standing like 6'6'1", but
you dip the shoulder to try and create the angle, and you're just bowling a dude over.
I'm great getting over screens and pickup. I mean, don't ask me to continue defending space after that, but I can get over the top of it for sure. But yeah, I think that would be the one thing, is just a little more like don't make everything about these like wild X outs and like digging every time. Like just play like a nice little drop, get your guy at the point of attack. Like let's say we're having Fred and Pascal, guarding a 1-4, 1-5 pick and roll. Let them do their thing, and then have OG force it toward OG at the nail. OG is a really good nail defender as well, with his length and his strong hands and his ability to kind of toggle between ball handler and his own assignment off the ball. Just do more of that, and you can get you have to, if for whatever reason the dig kind of like pulls OG in and he has to X out, that's fine. You just switch it. The Raptors are really good at those X outs, so they're pretty comfortable having their perimeter guys guard a bunch of different assignments. So yeah, I like that suggestion of drop. My only thing would have been just a little more traditional approach. And I think drop is a great way to go about it, just because switching, you take your big man out of it's hard to be a switch all defense a lot of the time. And that's part of what makes a guy like Bam Adebayo so great, is you think, oh yeah, let's take we're going to take our big man out of the paint. Okay, let's drive by him. Bam's like, well, you're not going to do that, and also you're not going to pass because I'm going to put my arms out, put them up, and all these different things. And you're like, geez, where do I go? So yeah, I think the switching at times was an issue, as it is for any team a lot that switches a lot and doesn't have the interior presence to maybe back them up if they get beat. So yeah, I like that idea a lot for sure. And it was a more specific version of what I would have suggested if I had a better answer than my shrugging the shoulders.
Well, here's one suggestion that I'm sure you'll be very good at. Since we're at the end of the podcast, you can suggest to people where they should keep up with you, etc.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at JackFrank_JJF. Truthfully, during the offseason, these last couple months or month or so, I've been pretty dormant in terms of posting much on there, but I'm still sharing my work when I write it. I'll be back tweeting my head off once the NBA season starts. You can find my work at Dime Up Rocks, The Analysts, and Liberty Ballers. I just wrote a piece kind of doing a little breakdown of my thoughts on the Raptors season last year, and entering this year, we're doing kind of an Eastern Conference breakdown over there as a collective writing staff. So if you're interested in more in-depth thoughts there, you can do that. Diamond Prox, the analyst, just general NBA work. Trying to have something on Scottie before the season starts. I don't know what the angle exactly will be, but I do want to write about him. I've written about a bunch of these rookies, and I've neglected him and Jalen Green among the kind of the high. I haven't written about Franz yet, but I wrote about Franz during the regular season, so I feel like I met my quota there. So trying to fit in Scottie and Jalen as well amid this incredible draft class.
It's you named, you're like, oh, I haven't done these guys. Scottie, Jalen, and Franz are like insanely fun, all of them. Like, I'm sure you'll enjoy the hell out of it when you do it. But listeners, it'll be linked, his piece on the Raptors. One of the few people who not from Toronto, not covering the Raptors, but you read something of theirs concerning the Raptors, you're like, oh, this guy could just be like a Raptors writer. He's paying that much attention. And if I can co-sign, Jackson covers the league at large. His written work is phenomenal. If you just want to follow him on Twitter, he has a keen sniffer for really fun plays and kind of like highlighting them. So if you're just looking to kind of, I don't know, take in basketball content via highlights, the Jackson Frank Twitter account is actually a pretty great spot. So yeah, all things Jackson Frank, tune in. Jackson, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And you open with kind words and you close. So I'll thank you again for them.
That's the recipe, dude. Listener, thanks for tuning in. If you're on YouTube, like the video. That helps, I hear. If you're on the podcast channel, peace out. We'll see you. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye.